All right, so welcome to the 2021 Recreational Trails Program Grant Workshop. We are with the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation in the Division of Planning and Recreation Resources. I'm Crystal McKelvey. I'm the Recreation Grants Manager for both RTP and the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So I'm the primary liaison between the federal agencies, DCR, and the localities' applicants and project sponsors. I'll let my colleague Kelly introduce herself.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Seaton, and I'm the Grants Program Planner working with Crystal on both those programs, but primarily focused on RTP. So for all of you applying in this grant round and for those projects that move forward, you'll hear a lot from me in the next couple of years.
Thank you very much. All right, so to get started today, we're going to go over the agenda here. We're going to do an RTP overview and talk about the funding opportunities. We are also going to talk about project eligibility, the application process, and then go into some project administration details and also describe the reimbursement procedures. This webinar is being recorded. The video itself will be posted afterwards on the DCR RTP website for your reference or for you to send anybody else to. We will stop periodically for questions between each of these sections listed. You can type in the chat box anytime, any questions that you have, and either I'll answer them on the fly or answer them when we do pause. Feel free to do that. All right. So as an overview, the Recreational Trails Program purpose is to provide, expand, and improve public recreational trail opportunities for both motorized and non-motorized use. This funding is from the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration through the FAST Act, which is Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. In Virginia alone, since 1993, over 300 projects totaling more than $300 million in funding have been completed or are heading towards completion. We have a lot of projects in construction right now. So for this year, the big question, what is the funding? For this year, there is approximately $1.4 million available, and per the regulations, this funding must be split over 3 categories. So 40% of this funding is for diverse use trails, 30% is split for both non-motorized and motorized. The non-motorized basically means like a single-use trail. So we do have some maximum requests. As you can see on the screen, $400,000 maximum for diverse use, which would be a $500,000 total project cost minimum. For non-motorized, the maximum request is $300,000. And then for motorized, we have up to $423,000 available for that 30%. So that can be the maximum request. The minimum funding is $50,000, which would equal a $62,500 minimum total project cost. I say those total project costs and different minimums because this is an 80-20 program, match reimbursement. The funding is competitive, so with those different categories, we expect to award approximately 1 to 3 grants in motorized, 2 to 4 non-motorized, single use, and diversified. So again, I'll reiterate, this is competitive. Last time in 2019, we received just over about 28, 29 applications. We moved about 10 of them forward. So, we're looking forward to seeing all of your applications. Payments will be made on a reimbursement basis. The funding is not provided up front, and you must be able to fund the project fully with periodic reimbursement. This is a share match requirement, so 20% is required for the match to then get that 80% reimbursed. So to talk about that 20% a little bit more, there are different options for how to provide that 20% share. That can include cash, which is pretty straightforward for the accounting process. Force account labor can be used if agreed upon up front. Please note that staff would need to provide work logs accounting for the work done specifically for the trail project and also proof of salary rates. Other grants can be used as match if both the RTP and other granting program have no conflict. Please provide the grant agreements or details to confirm. And if you have any questions about how to stack those, please feel free to contact me and we can talk that out. In-kind labor or donated materials can be used as share with appropriate documentation, and also volunteer labor with the correct rate and proper documentation of timesheets, etc., can also be used. Again, all of this must be outlined in your application and proposed budget, and this also must be able to be written into the grant agreement. These items cannot be usually added after the grant agreement is already authorized. So for the 2021 schedule, the applications opened April 1st and they are closing June 30th by 4 p.m. This year we are accepting them via email, so please read the details on how to do that. And then in early July, the applications will be reviewed by DCR staff and the advisory committee. The committee will meet approximately in mid-July, and then in late July, the applicants of projects recommended for funding are contacted. If you're not recommended for funding, you will also receive notification as such. In early to mid-August, we'll prepare to do site inspections, meet with you, talk about the project details, and prepare the documents to send to the Federal Highways Administration. They have the final authority to approve the projects and actually obligate the funding. So after Federal Highway does their process in September, we will release those project agreements. Please remember to not begin work until those project agreements are signed by all parties. As far as applicant eligibility, this program is open to local governments, including towns, cities, counties, and even PDCs, state agencies and federal government agencies, also tribal governments, public recreation government entities such as park authorities, and nonprofits can apply, but they must be partnered with a governmental entity, either through a MOA or a memorandum of understanding, to make sure that they will be working together and have a role in the overall project. So for eligible project types, RTP can be used for both preliminary engineering and construction, but it must end up with a final constructed product. So this can be for new recreational trails, restoration and rehabilitation of existing trails. For the rehabilitation, it must be able to be justified of why that is needed, not just due to poor maintenance, but for a significant cause. Rerouting trail sections, erosion remediation and control measures, safety needs, creating ADA accessibility, all of that is eligible for restoration and rehab. Trailhead facilities such as parking areas, staging areas, restrooms, kiosks, signage, anything such as that has a direct relationship with a recreational trail. Water trail facilities are also eligible, including kayak or boat launches. This must be on a designated water trail or provide paddling corridors between public access points. So this can include ADA compliant docks, signage, trailhead facilities, and parking as well. Acquisition is eligible, however, it must comply with federal acquisition guidelines, and the timing is critical. You must have willing sellers and true appraisals, and there can also be no condemnation of property. Please do contact us if you're considering an acquisition project for RTP, and also consider that the Land and Water Conservation Fund may be better able to assist with such projects. So conditional project elements that may be eligible given certain criteria are possible, but for the most part, sidewalks and bike paths strictly for transportation are not eligible components. VDOT's Transportation Alternatives Program may be able to better assist with such projects. Also, RTP is not for just the planning and scoping of a trail. This must result in a completed trail element. Final reimbursement will be processed after a site visit, and all work must fulfill the agreed upon scope of work. We'll talk about those details a little bit further on. So ineligible project elements, they may be part of your project to complete it, but they would not be eligible for reimbursement. That includes feasibility studies, food, gifts, most legal fees, and items that were not initially agreed upon at the scope of work. If you have any questions about legal fees, let me know. They do have to be directly related to the specific trail project. All right, I know that was a lot of information, so I'm going to go ahead and pause and check the chat box. Or I'm not seeing any. Kelly, do you see any chat questions?
We just got a question in.
Would anybody like to unmute and ask anything?
Crystal, we just got a question in asking if the expansion of an existing trail is eligible.
All right, well, hearing none, Kelly is gonna take some time to go over the application here.
Can you hear me, Crystal?
Yes, I can, and I do see one question. Expansion.
Okay, sorry.
Of an
Yeah,
existing
I had
trail.
said it. I wasn't sure if you heard me or not.
Yeah, so expansion of existing trails absolutely eligible, definitely. You know, if you're, especially if you're connecting a critical gap or extending what already exists, that's definitely eligible. Can you expand on the bike path? So for the most part, what I mean by that is if it's in the right of way of a public road, that's something that RTP does not fund, because again, there's the VDOT Transportation Alternatives Program that usually helps with that. And then Kyle, I see your question, what has changed since the 2019 application? We have revised the manual significantly, hopefully to make it more user-friendly. We have created a new application. It has similar questions and some are repeats from the past, but it's reorganized. And then we also have revised the scoring criteria. So we'll go into that a little bit more. All right, I see planning and design are eligible only if they result in a completed trail segment in one grant cycle. Often projects cost more than available grant funds. That's a great question. I do recommend that you consider phasing, given those minimums and maximums that we have. Unfortunately, 1.4 million is our max, you know, but within that, it is possible, you know, to do pretty significant linear feet of trails. So the design, actually, we could talk about the details of this. The design and NEPA review and such could technically be for a larger trail segment, and then the construction could be for a doable phase or section of it. And can we get feedback on the RTP requests that were submitted last month? Yes, we had that funding interest form, and thank you to all that did participate in that. That really helped with our planning procedures and will help us moving forward. We made sure that everybody that submitted was on our contact list, and if anybody has questions, you know, from that, we could certainly arrange a time to speak with you. Just send us an email. I think that covers the questions for now. Thank you, everyone. Great questions. And Kelly will go into the application and we'll keep going from there.
All right, thank you, Crystal. So now we just want to kind of walk through the application.
I see one more question. Can you share a competitive bid that was successful? As far as the bid documents, we do have good samples and examples of how to proceed with that, both with language and meeting the regulations. And maybe, Gregory, we could schedule a call to talk some more details about that. All right, Kelly, let's go into the application.
All right. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. So yeah, now we would just want to walk through the application sort of step by step and call out any questions that or any sections that we want to provide further explanations for you, or helpful kind of tips and hints on filling those sections out, especially since the application is new this year. So to start the application, hopefully many of you have been able to take a look at it from the website. It is a fillable PDF. So if you do not have a software to open that at this time, there is a free version of Acrobat Reader that you can download from Adobe. However, if for any reason you're unable to use this fillable PDF because of the software requirements, or the PDF isn't working on your system, just reach out to us via the email we'll have at the end of the screen or end of the slides, and we can work with you to have to give you an alternative format to submit your application in. Like Crystal mentioned, the application is new this year. In using the application, we ask you to attach some pages in different locations. So you can attach those just to the end of the application within the same PDF file. And the boxes are all set to auto size if you have more content than fits in the size of the box. Now, we say that, but we also ask you to please be as concise as you can in answering the questions. You know, if you're putting enough information that the text is auto-sized so much that it's hard to read at 100%, then you've probably written too much. We've, compared to the previous application, we have definitely split things out more and asked more direct questions. So there, it may look like more questions, but we want kind of more concise, direct answers to help the folks who are doing the reviews of this find out about your project. All right, and just a last note here that we have on this slide is that we do have a whole appendix to our manual. It is Appendix B, is called Application Resources. So that I would recommend that as you fill out the application, kind of pull that up and go side by side, similar to what we're doing right now. It'll call out different questions and include the links to some external data sources or suggestions on how to fill out questions and how to answer them. All right, next slide, please. All right, so we'll start at the top. Section A, applicant information. This one, definitely the straightforward of the sections. However, we would say for your organization name, if you're working with multiple entities that are submitting one, or multiple entities are working on this project, we do want just one organization listed here, and that's the person that will, or the group that will be the recipient of the RTP award. And then as far as contact person, we also would ask that that person is someone who is available, has the time and availability to, you know, respond to any follow-up information we may need from you and coordinate all the signatures and everything on your end that will be required. And then on the questions 8 through 11, we have district numbers and FIPS code. Those are all just required for part of our internal databases and how we track grant applications and grant awards. All right, next slide, please. Section B, project details. So I don't have a note here, but for the project title, definitely, you know, doesn't have to be anything fancy. If it is a phased project, it's helpful for us if the project title is, you know, the name of the trail in the section or phase, especially if you have another phase that you hope to be funded by RTP in the future or was previously funded by RTP. That definitely helps with our tracking. The project category, so that's how Crystal mentioned the differences between motorized, non-motorized, single use, and then diversified. If you're unsure, there's definitely trail projects out there that kind of could sort of fit into multiple categories. Reach out to us and we can help you determine that. For project summary and scope, those questions, we ask you to answer those kind of specifically about the RTP funded project in the case of where it is a phased project or you're requesting RTP funds for a specific element of the project. So please answer these, you know, in terms of scope, the numbers, answer them specifically related to what RTP funding would be used to accomplish. All right, property address. That we're asking for the address that Crystal and I could use to go visit the site. So whenever it comes time to do the site visits, so this may be the address of the trailhead, this may be the address of the across the street where we can go, but a way that we can get there. And then for latitude and longitude, we ask that you provide that in decimal degrees, and we'll use that for our future mapping purposes. And the last item in this section are the location maps. We don't want you to have to, if you don't already have these, we don't want you to have to do a ton of extra work to provide these maps. Definitely the first two maps we ask for a map of the location within Virginia and within your locality. Those can be simple, you know, mapping software of whatever your favorite mapping platform is. Just drop a pin on the location and take a screenshot. And then as far as a more detailed map of within the park, if it's in a park or, you know, within the open space, that if you don't already have an existing map, there's some resources in the application resources appendix that shows you how you could use the Natural Heritage Data Explorer to make your own map if you don't already have that available. All right, next slide, please. Okay, section C, project need. So the first question we ask about how the project fits in with the Virginia Outdoors Plan. And the link to that is also, it's on the screen, but it's also provided in the application. And for that, we just ask that you, in answering the question, include the page numbers for the VOP. You do not need to include attachments of the specific pages of that. And then for the recreation access model and Conserve Virginia, the next questions we ask how your project rates on those different ranking scales. Those are accessed via the Natural Heritage Data Explorer, which is also in the application resources appendix, but we're going to stop now and Crystal's going to switch her screen here and do a little demonstration of accessing that.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, so I'll try not to take too long here, but not everybody is familiar with the Natural Heritage Data Explorer. I do recommend that you go here. There are a lot of resources, so vanhde.org. And then you can either request an account or you can just go to map here. And that's open to anybody. And I hope my bandwidth holds up for this. I did have another screen. It'll open you to the full scope of Virginia, and you will have a pop-up terms of use, so you can read through that and then agree. So you come to Virginia, and then you can see that there are many layers that you can work with. You can switch the base map, etc. So this is a place where you could create your map and do screenshots if needed. And then you would simply zoom into your project location. I'm a Matthews resident, so I always like to go out here. And it will adjust and start loading. And so first I'll talk about Conserve Virginia. This layer was created at the request of Governor Northam and the administration, as conserved lands are certainly a priority. And this is a combination of many, many layers. And as it's loading, I'll go ahead and switch over to this one. All right, so you can go to the layer for Conserve Virginia over here. Pardon me, turn off the ID tool. Pardon the loading. Let's see. All right, so you would go here, click the beginner intro of the layer, Conserve Virginia, and then click Conserve Virginia Map, and you'll see a lot of different green polygons come up. You can zoom on into wherever you're located and look at the parcel and right-of-way that you're working on. And then you can use the identification tool here to then identify that area that is highlighted in green to see how much of your parcel is included percentage-wise. You can make an estimate. We'll verify that. And then you can also see which specific Conserve Virginia categories are within your project location. So in this case, I can scroll down and see that this pertains to floodplains and flooding resilience. I can click over here and see again that this one relates to multiple categories: natural habitat, ecosystem diversity, protected landscapes resilience, and floodplain and flooding resilience as well. So please do take a look at this. This is a required thing to answer on the application. And if you have any, difficulty using it, please just let us know and we'll walk you through it. So Conserve Virginia is that. And you can also turn on each category to see a better view of that. So that was floodplain and flooding resilience. That will show you there. And then we had a protected landscapes, and that'll show you the specific area. And then overall, again, the green will show all of the layers combined, and you can break down the different intersections. All right, and then for the recreation access model, this is a model that was developed by DCR Natural Heritage, and ultimately it's a gauge. I'll turn off Conserve Virginia here. It's a gauge to see both aquatic recreation and terrestrial recreation needs. And let's see, so you can turn on recreation access model and then turn on whichever layer you're looking at. And I would recommend that you look at both of these. For water trails, it's more pertinent to look at aquatic recreation. And so I'll just show you that real quick. And these are hexagons throughout the state. And then they are ranked from very high need to very low need, or all benchmarks met. Again, you can use the identification tool, and you can see specifically, if it's not clear, you can see different information about what is it meeting: boating, fishing, swimming, and then it will give you the overall all benchmarks met aquatic recreation score. But over here, this indicates a low need. So not all benchmarks met, and there is some need for more access here. Likewise, for terrestrial, you can turn off the aquatic. I still have the recreation access model layer on. I'm going to minimize aquatic and open terrestrial. Click terrestrial recreation access and then recreation score, and you'll see new polygons. Again, from very high need to low need to all benchmarks met. And so here I can use just the color, or I can turn on the identification tool again, click my project area, and in this case, this area is low need, and over here in green is very low need. So we just wanted to give you a little walkthrough about that. Again, please feel free to look at the different resources available on the Natural Heritage Data Explorer. There's a lot of different information here that you can use for lots of planning. I'm seeing a couple questions here about these models. So what does a high need water trail indicate? What it really indicates is that basically there's no other water access point nearby. It's based on a combination of travel distance, population size, and recorded recreation access point. We do have more information available about these layers and how they were developed on the Natural Heritage website. And yeah, so that would be for aquatic. And then the other question, what does a terrestrial low need indicate? That means that given that area and given that population and travel time, there is a demonstrated need for more terrestrial access, such as local parks, regional trails, regional parks. These are the different categories. So you could even drill in and turn off the recreation score, and you could say, well, what's the benchmark status for regional trails? And you can get even more details. Now we're scoring it based on the overall terrestrial recreation score or overall aquatic recreation score, but you can, for your purposes, go into this in more detail if you would like. Are there any other questions about these models? How local do these database recommendations go as to the project area? If your town needs access to a stream park, but the overall county may have large parks, does that make an area score more important than a very local need? Interesting. So with all of this, this is a model. It may not be perfect. No models ever can account for absolutely everything. And so we will look at the overall score, and then if you can provide further details about, so say it says there's a low need, but you yourself know as a local planner or local trail user that there is a significant need or the current trails are being overused, you can provide a narrative about that, and we will take that into account. I hope that helps answer that question. If anybody doesn't have the chat function, if you'd like to unmute, I can take a couple more questions real quick. All right, well, let me try to get this PowerPoint going again.
6, 0, 3, 0.
I can hear somebody, but I couldn't understand a question. Is there a question from the audience? All right, well, we will move on for now, and we'll pause again for other questions later. Let me get to our correct slide, pardon me. Let's see. Sorry, there's always something technical that comes up no matter how much I practice. Okay, I'll let Kelly continue discussing the application.
All right, thanks, Crystal. So we're still in section C here. We're to the point of question 26 on the application, so local or regional plans. So we ask for you to indicate how the project addresses needs in any of these planning documents or surveys, and we ask you to attach the pages. So by relevant pages, we mean you don't have to provide attachments for your whole plan or any of the or all of the survey results if it was through a survey. We're looking for the pages where your specific project is mentioned or the more general goal that this project would meet or fall under is included. So if we're just looking for those pages. Now, if your planning documents are available online and you want to provide those links in case the advisory committee wants some more background information, I certainly encourage you to do that, but we don't need all the pages from your planning documents there. So the next question and bullet here, talking about the project uniqueness within your locality, the county, and the region, and then economic impact. So specifically about the uniqueness, we're looking for you to answer, each of those. How is your project, what makes it unique or different within each of those, within the locality, within the county, or within the region as they're applicable. All right, and the last point here, critical gaps and lengthening. So this is where if this is an extension on an existing trail or it's filling a gap in a larger trail system, please provide that information for us. If it's a large initiative on a trail project and there is the background information and justification for that that larger trail system available online or in a website, you can certainly provide those links there. You don't need to kind of copy and paste and rewrite information that is available in other sources, but we just want to understand the other trail that this is part of. All right, next slide, please. All right, so we are to section D, which is about the service area population who are likely to use your trail. So the first question is our close to home question, 10-minute walk or 10-mile drive for more rural non-city areas. So the way that we've been telling folks to think about this and how to answer this question is if you would take a circle around your trail location in that distance. So for the 10-mile example, so within 10 miles, a circle around that your trail location, are there other trail opportunities there? And if the answer is no, then we would say, yes, that's the first opportunity for that community that lives within there. If the answer is that, yes, there are other trail opportunities, but you still believe that your area is underserved, then just describe that and justify your reasoning in the box provided. For question 30, which discusses equitable experiences for people with disabilities. So for this question, we really want to understand how your project is providing access for a wide variety of users. So we would encourage you to think beyond just maybe what we traditionally think of in trail access as folks who may use mobility devices, and think about how does this project provide access for maybe visitors who have visual impairments or other disabilities. What we do not want to see are kind of blanket that the project will follow the ADA or meet all requirements. We really want to see how you're going to do that. And we do have an appendix in the manual. It's Appendix C that it lists some different accessibility resources that range from kind of the cut and dry, here are the standards, through some different guidance documents and best practice documents specifically about trails. All right, for the next questions, we have here a few about income and health disparities of your service area population. So for those, the application resources document also includes some different links and data sources that can be used. However, there are not really complete data sets for this information for the entire state. So if those data sets do not work for you, and you have another source, maybe your county has done some type of research or has some type of survey that shows these, certainly you can provide other resources and just cite them and include a link if they're available online in that section. And the last item here, public involvement. So for this question, it's 34 on the application. We want to understand kind of the range of any type of public involvement that may have happened related to this project. So that could have been kind of more general, where the public might have suggested something at a different type of, council meeting or board meeting. Or maybe you had very specific meetings about this project, or perhaps you've had some direct consultation with different groups in the planning and design process, or just in the desire to start this trail project. So any of that type of information is helpful to include in that section. All right, next slide, please. Section E, project readiness. So the first question are just check boxes that we ask for you to let us know, what the right-of-way status is. So if it's kind of something more simple, your entity directly owns the right-of-way, then that's great. We ask you to describe that and state that in question 36 as well. Now, if it's something that's a little more complex, certainly doesn't make you ineligible or reduce your points in this category, but we just need that explanation there. And in any circumstance, we want you to attach the documentation that shows that either you own it or it's under easement, or you have a willingness to sell letter. Just provide documentation that supports the statement that you've made in question 35. The next item here, life expectancy. So the preference for DCR in the RTP program is that the life expectancy is at least 20 years, but we also want you to be realistic. If the materials or whatever you're using does not have a 20-year reasonable lifespan, that's okay. Just please state that in your application. And that's somewhat related to the public access period. Again, the preference would be for longer periods. If the life expectancy and public access period don't match up, we may have some follow-up questions for you in terms of maybe an easement or a lease expires before the end of the usable lifespan of the trail. So we may look for some additional information. So any of that type of stuff that you can explain in the application is helpful for us. All right, question 39, we ask you to attach a schedule. So the project schedule, we ask you to consider both the preliminary engineering and the construction phase. And I know we haven't talked much about those yet. Crystal is going to go into that in a little bit here. But we ask that you submit a schedule, and that can help us make sure that we're moving everything along in working with your schedule. Now, typically the RTP grant agreements are for 3 years for the whole project. So from when the projects are authorized, which with the schedule we had at the beginning, that will be around September this year. There's generally 3 years. Of course, if we can do it faster, we will certainly work with you. We want you to be able to go faster too, but 3 years is the typical agreement length. All right, and the last one on this slide is construction drawings. So this question, again, we want to know just the status of where they are if they exist. So RTP can fund the creation of the design of your site and the construction drawings themselves, but it's helpful for us to know how far along you are in that process, and we can kind of match that up with the amount of funds you're requesting for that and things like that. All right, next slide, please. All right, so related to those environmental analysis, the question here is, again, just a background. We want to know how far along you are in this process. However, it's not necessary for it to be complete before you apply to RTP, because RTP provides time and funding to finish this. So providing any information that on how far along you are in this process if you have started that. And same with the permitting. We want to know kind of how far along you are in that process. We know most likely you will not have any permits at this stage, but how much planning has been done, and have any issues come up that make you, unsure if there's things that may take longer time than we would reasonably expect. All right, next slide, please. All right, we have made it to section F, management, maintenance, and operations. The first question, grant administration. So this question, we just want to know that there is time or funding or some way that that someone is responsible for coordinating with us. Now you may have, and we know some entities have a consultant who performs some of this work. If that's the case, please indicate that here. There is no scoring preference for those either way, but we just need to have all the information so we can make sure that all makes its way into your grant agreement. And if you are seeking reimbursement funds for those administration costs, please indicate it here, again, just so we can keep that documentation going, making sure everything makes its way into your budgets, into the grant agreement, so it can be authorized and ultimately reimbursed by federal highways. And the last question here for long-term maintenance, that's another question where we're looking just for the information on your planning process. Does your entity have either the experience or commitment to maintain the RTP project after it's built? All right, next slide, please. Section G, budget and grant match. So the first piece of this is the budget. So we ask you to attach a budget, and that's because we know everyone will have different formats for your budget. So format it however works best for you and include it as an attachment. We do want it as detailed as possible, broken down by the phases, and we don't necessarily need to the level of your deck screw costs 56 cents or something, but as much detail as you can provide is helpful for us. And we ask for a budget narrative because we want more than just the item and the number. A little bit of a narrative helps us understand how the budget was estimated and how those numbers came about. Next slide, please. All right, funding sources and financing. So the two pieces there. First, the funding source. So that question we want to know, as Chris already talked about at the top, how are you covering that ultimate 20% that you're going to be responsible for? If it's through other grants, we ask you to provide the grant agreement so that we can make sure there's no conflicts between them. If it's through donations, we need to know that as well. So how are you going to fund the 20% that you're not going to get back? And then, so the second piece of that is how will you finance the project? And we ask for proof of ability to finance, just to so we know that you'll be able to pay all of the project expenses that come up as they come up while you're waiting for the reimbursement. So it does not mean you have to show us you're able to front your entire $200,000 project. It just means that we have to have proof, whether that's through the actual department's budget, a board resolution, proof of a credit line, some way to show that you'll be able to incur all the expenses and kind of hold any expenses that come in the couple of months it can take for a reimbursement to be processed. When you think about between you incurring the expense and then collecting all your necessary documentation and getting bank documentation, sending it to us, we will process it, get it ready, send to federal highways to release the funds back to DCR, who sends it to you. So that can just take a little bit of time. So you will have to hold some funds on your accounts for a little bit of time before you can get reimbursed. All right, next slide, please. So we have made it to the attachments section. This is page 9 of the application. This is just a summary page. So any of these attachments, it is mentioned elsewhere throughout the application where you needed to attach them. We included a summary list just to help kind of keep track of everything. The items in bold, everyone is expected to have to include. The others will just be if that situation in the question applied to you. So there is some descriptions in here, so that can be helpful, but for the most part, this is just a summary and you'll be able to see where to attach them and how they fit in earlier in the application. All right, next slide, please. And the final section, certification. So we ask that all the applications are signed by someone with signatory rights for your entity. And I'll leave that up to you all to determine who that is. And as Crystal said at the beginning, new this year, we'll accept all applications via email only to the email that's on your screen. We'll have it, it's in lots of locations, recreationgrants@dcr.virginia.gov. But due to our email server, our maximum file size is 25 megabytes. So just reach out to us at least a couple days ahead of time if you think that your files are going to exceed this, and we can work. We have a few options for larger files and getting them transferred. All right, next slide, please. One last slide here. And that's just to talk a little bit about the evaluation and scoring process. So we've already mentioned that the scoring criteria are revised this year. They're included as an appendix to the RTP manual, so you can look at those and see how different items are scored and what the different criteria are. The process will work that once we receive all the applications after June 30th, so the next couple days, Crystal and I will look at all the applications, make sure they're eligible and they're complete, and everything that's complete and eligible we send on to the RTP advisory committee who reviews and scores them. The advisory committee will send their scores back to us, and then we'll all meet and they'll recommend projects for funding. All right, next slide, please. And so that ends my part here about the application. So if there's any questions, I know I've seen some things coming and going through the chat and that Crystal's been answering. Any more questions on the application itself or the evaluation process, go ahead and put them in the chat, and then we can open up for phone calls in a moment too.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I'll just read for anybody that's on the phone a couple of the questions we received. One comment was about the process perhaps being time consuming and the project is for a single-use trail. We certainly encourage single-use trails to apply. That would be the non-motorized category. And sometimes we receive a lot of applications for diverse use and not as many for single use. So for sure that is eligible. Also, we do recognize that this is time consuming and everybody is quite busy. Make your best efforts for the answers. If you have any questions or need assistance, we are here to help. And then additionally, somebody asked, how detailed and exact does the project schedule and budget need to be? Without an engineering design process that is fully completed by the time of submission, it will be difficult to estimate the exact project cost, necessary permits, construction timeframes, etc. In short, Kelly described this a little bit. We're asking for your best effort. We just want to see the more detailed, the better. And that's mainly to make sure that we know you're considering all possible elements. We do recognize that they are only estimates and construction costs can vary greatly over time. The goal is to try to secure enough funding when possible to ensure that your project can be completed as planned. So are parking facilities at trailheads eligible? Yes, they are. Those are trailhead amenities, and so those are eligible. Typically, we don't fund just parking lots for already existing trails unless there's a significant need. So if you can consider maybe also increasing the use of your trail along with that, that would kind of give the project more consideration. But certainly parking facilities are eligible. Just to be clear, we put all attachments at end of application and send one file as a PDF versus two PDFs, one for application, one for attachment. Thank you for that question. Again, this is our first time doing email submissions, so we're testing this out too. It is ideal to have just one complete PDF to make sure we're not missing anything. If you think it's best because of file size or because you're limited with being able to combine documents and different Adobe versions, just give us a heads up, and please be sure to put, email of 1 and email of 2 so that we don't miss anything. Is contingency on the cost estimate included in the funding? Contingency level suggested. Frankly, many of our projects, especially those based within localities, have contingencies. I would recommend that you use your local guidance on that and see if any of your colleagues have suggestions that they've used on previous projects. We can talk about that in more detail if needed, but that is something that is eligible and we'd like you to estimate, but isn't always necessary depending on the project. Are the RTP advisory members listed somewhere? Well, as a matter of fact, perhaps they're not currently, and we could suggest doing so. They are all trail users, enthusiasts, and very knowledgeable. Many of them have served on the committee for some of them over a decade, so they're very familiar with the program. We have communication with them. They assisted with reviewing the scoring and the application and manual, and we're very grateful for their service. I will check in with that committee about posting those that are on it. And does the grant fund interpretive elements, signage, sensors, QR codes? Interpretive elements, yes. Those would be, signs and trail amenities. So absolutely, we do have projects that are wayfinding or provide educational elements through QR codes, etc. We are not opening this to strictly education projects this year due to the limited apportionment. But if you have a trail project for construction and you want to include the cost of interpretive elements, please, add that to your project details. So since DCR is managing this grant allocation, do applications from within DCR get handicapped? Not at all. All applications are weighted equally, scored equally. They all go into the same consideration. We do separate them by what category they are by the time we get to scoring and deciding the funding. But DCR, though we are all under one agency, DCR would be treated as a, sub-grantee, just as a locality or other entity would. And to clarify, can a Parks and Recreation Department of a town city apply separately from the town city it is a part of? Yes, we do frequently have applications from Parks and Recreation departments, as long as typically you do need to have a board resolution, possibly depending on your locality, allowing you to apply and or allowing the funding to be reserved for this purpose. So I recommend you, discuss that internally, but definitely Parks and Rec departments are frequently the actual administrators of these. And I will check on that RTP committee membership being posted. Would anybody like to unmute on the phones and ask any questions?
Hey, this is Greg. I'm sorry I'm listed as Ed Stelter. I missed a little bit at the beginning of the presentation, and you may have covered this. Are there any, I was reading some of the basic information, is there any high-end caps on the funding allowed or the matching amounts? And you mentioned earlier about parking lot trailheads and stuff like that. Would a bridge be allowed, or is there any restrictions on?
Fade it out, Greg.
Sorry.
To answer your first question, we did go over that. The minimum request is $50,000, and then for diversified, maximum request is $200,000. Non-motorized use, maximum $150,000. Motorized, maximum is $423,000. So it does depend on the category, and that would be the 80% of the project cost. RTP is an 80-20 match reimbursement. So therefore, for example, the minimum request being $50,000, that would be 100% would be $62,500 total project.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we are recording this presentation, so anybody that missed the beginning, you will be able to see it. It will be posted on the RTP site. Any other fun questions before we move on? I appreciate y'all. We're coming up to an hour. I know it's kind of long, but we just wanted to be comprehensive. All right. I will go on to project administration. So once this whole thing proceeds with the application, recommended for funding, and getting an authorized project, you would begin the project administration. And I'll break this up in different parts between the grant terms, those agreements, what the preliminary engineering phase incorporates, how to proceed with environmental review, then the construction phase, how to process reimbursement requests, and then the project closeout. You will be notified of the committee results one way or another via email, on DCR letterhead, and those that are not selected, we will try to open a time in the future to discuss your application if you have any questions about that. And then anybody that is recommended for funding, we will continue correspondence with that primary contact to determine how to move forward, talk about the details. Part of that will be an on-site pre-inspection and going over that final scope of work. It's important to have that pretty concise, but also comprehensive for when the project will be submitted to the Federal Highways Administration for authorization. Please remember to not begin any billable work until the agreement is signed. There can be some exceptions to that if for some reason you have a need. Please talk to us beforehand. Definitely don't begin construction. So the grant terms, as Kelly mentioned earlier, are typically for a 3-year project period. And historically, we split this into 18 months for preliminary engineering and 18 months for construction. Either phase can take less time, as we said, but within preliminary engineering, this is the time to complete the NEPA level review, start the permitting process if needed, and complete those design and engineering plans. If you have a consultant or engineer either on contract or procured, please do provide that information later once we start the grant itself about how they were procured, and make sure that they're providing you detailed invoices. Then once the PE is complete, i.e. the Federal Highways Administration has approved the environmental review documentation, and you have submitted all the reimbursement for PE, then we will move into providing a construction agreement. Do not begin building until all of this is complete. Also, please do not put documents out for bid until DCR has reviewed those documents. A little warning here, due to the regulations, PE grants that are unable to move to construction within 2 years must return the funding to DCR, which will then be returned to Federal Highways. This has hardly ever happened, but just need to put that caveat there. So to go into more detail on the environmental analysis, sometimes this can seem really overwhelming, and I do understand and respect that, but we are trying to assist as much as we can. Please reference Appendix E of the manual, where we have full instructions for how to complete each section per NEPA standards, and we also have an example categorical exclusion form available that Federal Highways recommends we use. 98% of the time, RTP projects are categorical exclusion levels for NEPA assessment. There are times where, due to agency correspondence, it may need to rise to an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement, but we will determine that with Federal Highways once the preliminary agency correspondence has been completed. So the process is to contact the state and federal agencies that we list in the appendix, give them your project details, scope of work, and project area. Save all of that correspondence, whether it's email or not, try to create a PDF of that. And then from that information, you will fill out the CE form. I already covered the Appendix E, and most of the time they are a CE. There's also a public comment component that is necessary. We recommend that that be a 30-day period, so plan accordingly for that in your project timeline. Once this is completed and reviewed by DCR, this will be submitted to Federal Highways prior to construction for their final authorization. Also within the preliminary engineering phase is when the scoping, final design, and engineering can be complete. When applying, make sure to include everything that you foresee may need to be done. If you've already completed a lot of the design and engineering, let us know. and then the environmental work can proceed as well. Please consider if you need any permits, you may want to talk to your local permitting group to see, but that might include DEQ, stormwater. It might include a JPA joint permit application if it's work within a waterway. Just think that through a little bit as best as you can. The permits don't need to be obtained right away. They need to be obtained prior or during construction, basically prior. Another thing that must be secured is the right-of-way. This can be leased, but we need to see that lease agreement, and we want it to be, say longer than 5 years. We want it to have a significant lease term on it. Then engineering will be complete, and if contracted, this bid documentation and final reports billing will be needed as far as if you're contracting for the engineering and such. So once all of that's complete, then the construction phase can begin. Again, we would close out the PE phase and execute a construction project agreement between DCR and the sub-grantee, do the final permitting process, and then DCR will review the plans and those bid documents prior to construction beginning. We basically just want to make sure that standard Virginia procedures are being followed, and that the project bid documents do have recognition that federal highway RTP funds are involved. Then the construction phase is scheduled to be completed within 18 months. Now, if your PE phase only takes 6 months, you could technically have, longer, that 3-year period overall to complete construction. Each project's a little different. So overall, this project, these funds are federal. So there are different federal circulars and regulations to comply with. We've provided as best a summary as we can within the DCR RTP manual, but you should reference these as well in your bid documentation. The procurement procedures must follow Virginia standards, and a big thing to know up front is that all RTP projects must comply with Buy America, i.e. any iron or steel components must be manufactured and certifiable as being made in the USA. And we'll need certification statements if you have any of those materials. So you must submit all this pertinent documentation and also keep them on file yourself, but we'll walk you through it. Then we need to process reimbursement so that you can get your funds returned on this project. So the bid documentation part of this also involves DBE and SWAM efforts. That's disadvantaged business enterprises, also small women and minority owned businesses. So proof of due diligence must be done, i.e. that they had the opportunity to bid or participate. We also need to see a work completed report, percent done, or, a list of which components were completed for each invoice and payment. Those payments need to be shown as truly spent. We need to see the cleared checks, those full invoices. If it's a direct deposit, we just need to see a record of that database, a screenshot showing how the expense was paid to said entity. Also, we will need to see how each reimbursement request is accounting for that 20% share. If it's donations, you can provide proof of that. If it's a cash balance, we'll just calculate 80-20 off of the total expended. Again, Buy America is very important here. There's a strict threshold of $2,500 upon delivery. Anything up to that amount doesn't have to have certification, but it's best to try hard to get everything to be manufactured and certified. Please make your construction team aware of that. Federal Highways has requested that we process reimbursement requests per project at least once every 3 months. This will keep it active and make sure that we're all on the right track. Please also indicate when it's the final reimbursement for the phase so that we can know to prepare the next grant agreement for construction or to prepare for closeout. Again, please reference these federal regulations. And first, DCR, Kelly and I will review your documentation and prepare the forms to go to Federal Highways. So we may go back and forth just to get some clarification and make sure the package is complete, and then Federal Highways will review. Once they've done that, the funds will pass from Federal Highways to DCR. our finance team, and then they will release the funds to the sub-grantee. This can take some time. It can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks, depending on the process. We've still been pretty successful at making this pretty prompt even during these times. We will need to have a W-9 on file and remittance information of where to send those funds. They can either be direct deposit or check. It's also recommended by Federal Highways that you register on SAM, the System for Award Management. All right, so then we will go towards project closeout once all deliverables are complete and that scope of work has been accomplished. We will come out and do a site inspection, meet with you, and hopefully get to walk the trail a little bit. My favorite part. We'll also take some photos, and if we can't make it out there for any reason, you can submit photos, but we prefer to come on site and meet with you. Then we'll file a report of final accomplishments and document what % dollar value of donated or volunteer work was done, and then if any DBE or SWAM involvement was present. It's not technically required to have DBE SWAM involvement, but if any did participate, we want to indicate that. All right, so in summary, it must be completed to federal standards, but it is doable. I know I myself was a little intimidated by all the regulations at first, but we are trying to make it as straightforward as possible for you. Any delays or amendments are understandable. They do happen. Just keep us informed as promptly as possible, and then we can do the processing of informing Federal Highways of any changes needed. Also, extensions are possible if justifiable. We must know this, before the expiration of the agreement, and we must be able to provide, details of why that is requested. So we can make things work. We've had a wide variety of projects, and we really look forward to reviewing all of your proposed ideas. And open communication is key. We're here to help, and we really like working with y'all. So are there any general questions on project administration? Thanks again for hanging in there, everybody. So yes, this will be recorded as a YouTube video and then linked on the DCR RTP website for you to access or share with colleagues. We can, if you send us an email at recreationgrants@dcr.virginia.gov, we could send a PDF copy of the presentation as well. We could post those on the website too. All right, well, we just want to take a minute to talk about some other grant opportunities. You can go to this website to learn about those. So tomorrow we are presenting about the Trail Access Grant. This is brand new opportunity. It's also open now and closes June 30th. This is for ready to build and or install projects on existing trails to increase the accessibility for people with different disabilities and needs. So again, join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. if you'd like, but we will also be posting that on the website and recording it. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is administered by us through the National Park Service, and this is a 50-50 match reimbursement program for acquisition and development projects. We plan to open this in the fall of this year, and just to promote that a bit, trail projects are also eligible as long as the park can be protected in perpetuity for outdoor recreation. So any questions about that program, let us know, but we're going to be providing outreach throughout the year about that. Additionally, DCR administers the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation. They have received full funding, and they will be opening the next round this summer. This is to fund the protection of open spaces and parklands, lands of historical or cultural significance, farmlands, forests, and natural areas. Suzanne Bolbakaya and her team administer that, so her contact information is here. All right, well, thank you again. I'll take this moment to allow anybody on the phones to ask any last questions, and this is our contact information. Feel free to give us a call or send us an email anytime.